On to Nigeria. The economy over there grew faster than anticipated in the fourth quarter of 2023, and that happened after the oil sector exited a more than 3-year-long contraction. Gross domestic product grew by 3.5% in the 3 months ending in December, compared to growth of 2.5% in the previous quarter. Now, that is according to data that was released earlier today by the National Bureau of Statistics. Let's bring in Deji Badimosi. He's joining us now live from Lagos to go through some of the data that came out here. So, Deji, let's start with the oil sector. A 12% expansion there, and this comes after multiple years of contraction going all the way back to around 2020. A, what explains that expansion? But B, can it continue for the remainder of the year?
Well, let me start by answering B now. It's difficult to tell whether it can continue for the remainder of the year, but you know, the outlook, I should say the projection looks a bit positive, just because of what the government has been doing, trying to ramp up oil production. You know, the government has been waging a war against oil theft. Of course, that war is yielding some positive results. For instance, we understand the output for January was somewhere around 1.6 million barrels per day. For February, well, we understand it's fluctuating between 1.4 and 1.5. So, well, the hope is that it will continue. I mean, the production level will continue to go up, and the government needs that production level to continue to go up so that it's able to achieve its economic or meet its economic target now. Now, why did we see this expansion now in the fourth quarter of 2023? Well, during that period, oil production was around 1.55 million barrels per day. That's what we produced, and that's the reason why you could see this growth in the oil sector. Before then, we had been doing between 1.3, 1.4. At some point, we were doing somewhere around 900 barrels per day, sometime in 2020, 2021. So, you would remember that the government under Buhari, of course, started this fight against oil theft. So production now peaked up at 1.55 million barrels. We were able to see that growth. So that explains the reason for that growth. So it's now for this government to maintain that growth trajectory now, because if it's not able to do so, then things will be difficult. It will be difficult for the government to meet its economic targets now. But the hope is that that projection, I mean, the growth will continue along that trajectory. If we're able to do 1.6, 1.7, the budget benchmark is 1.78 million barrels per day. If the government is able to meet that, then things can be fine for Nigeria, Rama.
I want to turn to agriculture. It's a fairly big employer in Nigeria. It posted a real GDP growth rate of around 2.1% for the last quarter of the year. But that growth rate has stagnated, really, over the last decade. There was a contraction, in fact, in the first quarter of 2023. And I know you've done some reporting on this, but can we now draw a direct link between that stagnation that we're seeing in the agricultural sector and the insecurity that we're seeing affecting parts of the country?
Absolutely, Rama. Let's talk about the Boko Haram insurgency, for instance. It's lasted for over a decade. And, you know, the part of the country that has been badly affected by the insurgency is the northeast of the country. It's a food basket of the country. And then you look at the banditry and kidnappings you have. I mean, the areas that have been badly impacted are also the food basket of this country. You talk about states in north central of Nigeria, like Benue State. You talk about states in the northwest of the country. These are areas where the food of this country actually comes from. And these areas have been badly impacted for a very long time. And that's why we've seen this long stagnation now in the agriculture sector. It's even a surprise that we're seeing a slight growth. I mean, when you compare the quarter before Q4 now of 2023. But the truth is that, look, everything is directly linked to the crisis we're having in you know, most parts of these food belts of the country, especially in the north of the country. So you look at the northeast, where the bulk of our food comes from. There's a problem there. Talk of the northwest, talk of the north central. So not until things actually stabilize there and security actually improves, we might not see any very significant growth in the agriculture sector. So that's just the reason why we continue to have this challenge with that sector.
One last question for you, Deji. The government has a stated growth target for this year of 3.8%. But looking at some of the more recent forecasts coming out on the Nigerian economy, the IMF has a growth forecast of 3% penciled in for this year, roughly the same thing for 2025. So assuming that the government's 3.8% target is credible, what policy mix will the government implement to get to that number?
Well, of course, as you know, the government has liberalized quite a lot of sectors. Let's start with, for instance, the removal of subsidy, even though it's causing a lot of problems in Nigeria at the moment. The liberalization of the forex market now, even though that is also causing a lot of problems. So the government is looking at some of these policies that in the long run, the country will benefit from it. The government is also planning to ramp up tax collection now without really increasing tax, but then ramp up collection. The government has been embarking on an aggressive revenue drive. We're seeing that happen. It's just unfortunate that the economy is taking a very big hit at this time. So that of course makes the projection sort of doubtful. But then you look at some of the policies of the government, whether you're talking about the tax reform policy, you're talking about its revenue policy, you're talking about its forex policy. You add all of these policies together, the government believes it would be able eventually to meet that target of 3.8% growth. But then, look, it's still early. Don't also forget that the CBN has projected that even though inflation is at almost 30% at the moment, that by the end of the year, it will come down to somewhere around 21%. So we're waiting for the CBN. They're going to have the first Monetary Policy Committee meeting in the coming week. And so we wait and see what monetary policies now will be coming out of that MPC meeting now. But the government is pretty confident that despite the fact that things are difficult at the moment, the country would still be able to meet its economic target, especially that GDP growth rate of 3.8%. But then the question people have always asked is, look, how do you translate this economic growth rate now to something positive for the common man on the street? How does it affect and make his life better? And that's where the challenge is, Rama.